Thank you. Our excellent readers are 18 so this year. This morning, let's welcome in now.
I can barely hear him.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hey, thank you, Paul. Good morning.
Good morning,
to you,
everyone.
Paul.
Yeah, good morning to you, Bill.
Thank you.
And good morning to Susan, who's a new person around here. So if I left anybody out, I'm sorry about that. I don't want to leave out the people we're talking to. People in the Midlands, Nebraska, Iowa, Dakota, wherever you may be. Good morning to you. The weather here is kind of icky. It's kind of rainy. It kind of wants to rain, but hasn't. It's more or less on the windshield of the cars I was driving here. It was just real small drops, or wasn't even a drop, was it?
Kind of a mist.
A mist. That's what I see.
And a chill in the air.
Yes, and of course, if there's a mist, that means there's not any sun. There's not any sun, which is true. Well, you good people out there, hope you had a good night's sleep and you're ready to face the rest of this week. And so why don't you just kind of look out the window and look at the moisture that's coming down and thank the Lord that He's providing some so we can have some pretty flowers and green grass and all those good things and just clean off the air. Starting off this morning, from some main news here that comes from Washington, D.C., and it's about Iran. The U.S. Supreme Court rejected an appeal from Iran's central bank yesterday and cleared the way for nearly $2 billion of that country's frozen assets to be turned over to American families whose loved ones were victims of terrorist attacks. The case brought together on one side the Obama administration, the Republican-led Congress, and most of the high court's justices. Federal law usually prohibits lawsuits against foreign governments, but makes an exception for terrorism cases. Even so, plaintiffs who win such claims typically have a hard time collecting any money. More than 1,000 U.S. plaintiffs had won claims against Iran, most of them for injuries suffered in the 1983 bombing of U.S. Marine barracks back over in Lebanon. In 2012, the president issued an executive order to freeze the assets of any Iranian financial institution, including the Central Bank of Iran, that are here in the United States. Bank Markazi, Iran's central bank, fought the order and insisted that the assets held in its New York branch were the property of others. Congress then adopted a special law, the Iran Threat Reduction and Syria Human Rights Act of 2012, which said those assets shall be subject to execution to satisfy claims against Iran for acts of terrorism. The law cited by name and the specific judgments won against Iran. Lawyers for the Iranian bank sued, arguing that Congress violated the separation of powers by intervening in a pending legal case. They lost, first before a district judge, then before the U.S. Court of Appeals in New York. When they appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, Solicitor General Donald Verrill urged that the appeal be turned away. In the view of the United States, the law-abiding members of the international community should not find such legislation cause for alarm. The Supreme Court heard the case nonetheless, apparently at the insistence of Chief Justice John Roberts, but the justices affirmed the court's lower ruling by a 6-2 vote. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said Congress can pass laws to make sure that judgments are paid. In accordance with the courts below, we perceived no violation of the separation of powers principles and no threat to the independence of the judiciary, she wrote in the case. On the other hand, Roberts, a strong defender of the independence of the court, said Congress may not decide individual cases. At issue here is a basic principle, not a technical rule, he wrote. Only Justice Sotomayor joined his dissent. House Speaker Paul Ryan said the court made the right decision today. Families of Iranian terror victims have had to wait for far too long to recoup those payments. In other cases, yesterday, the court expressed doubts about laws in at least a dozen states, including Nebraska, that makes it a crime for people suspected of drunken driving to refuse to take alcohol tests. The justices heard arguments in 3 cases challenging North Dakota and Minnesota laws that criminalize a refusal to test for alcohol in a driver's blood, breath, or urine if police have not first obtained a search warrant. Bill?
Thank you, Jack. Who gets to stick a straw into the Great Lakes? A Milwaukee suburb is asking a regional regulatory group for access to the water. This is from Waukesha, Wisconsin. A push for more access to Great Lakes water is at a key point. A regional regulatory group meets in Chicago this week to consider this Milwaukee suburb's request to draw from Lake Michigan. The coming recommendation from the Great Lakes St. Lawrence River Water Resources Regional Body could have big implications for other cities that might want to tap into the Great Lakes. Environmental groups have lined up to fight the idea. The regional group meets today and possibly Friday to seek a consensus opinion, which it is to forward to the 8 governors of the Great Lakes states. They would then accept or reject Waukesha's plan. Because the governor's representatives are involved in this week's talks, it's likely that a thumbs up or a thumbs down from the regional body, which includes 2 Canadian provinces, will stick. Waukesha's drinking water is tainted with naturally occurring radium, and the city is seeking a new source. Officials say Lake Michigan, about 20 miles away, is the best alternative. Under a landmark 2008 agreement that bans most diversions of Great Lakes water outside its natural boundaries, communities within the watershed can tap the lakes, but others cannot. Waukesha is part of a county that straddles the line, so it can apply for an exception. But to prevail, it needs okays from the governors of Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. 1 no vote sinks the proposal. Waukesha's is the first request to get this far. Critics say its plan, involving a $200 million system to pump and later return 16.7 million gallons per day from Lake Michigan, would set a bad precedent and jeopardize 1/5 of the world's freshwater supply. Dozens of groups have emerged as opponents, saying Waukesha has asked for more water than it needs and hasn't proved there are no better alternatives. Jennifer Caddick, a spokeswoman for the Alliance for the Great Lakes, said that Waukesha can remove the radium for less than the cost of its diversion system. She said the suburb's request could lead to death by 1,000 straws for the lakes because other communities could line up and ask for a share. One little dip may not cause massive harm immediately, Caddick said, but the application by Waukesha is absolutely precedent-setting. Waukesha's officials, meanwhile, say the water they're requesting amounts to dipping a teaspoon into a large pool. They say that each day they would replace what they remove with treated wastewater. We're going to return 100% of the water we're drawing from the Great Lakes, Waukesha Mayor Sean Riley. The city's request, he said, wouldn't open the floodgates for water to go anywhere, such as the drought-stricken areas of the West. Waukesha's exception is based on geography and need, and only communities in similar situations could stand to benefit, he said. The argument that this will allow water to go to Arizona is being made by people who haven't read the compact or who are purposefully misrepresenting, Riley said. The regional group's meeting, which involves representatives from the Great Lakes states, plus Ontario and Quebec, could extend into Friday if the body can't reach a unanimous agreement. Here's Jack.
Very good. This comes from Saudi Arabia. Excuse me. With fresh friction worrying on an old alliance, President Barack Obama pressed Saudi Arabia and other Persian Gulf nations yesterday to step up efforts to defeat the Islamic State and help rebuild war-torn Iraq. Obama huddled privately with Saudi King Salman, as Defense Secretary Ash Carter urged the other Gulf nations to give more support to Iraq, a theme Obama plans to emphasize at a regional summit with various Far Eastern countries. The president's visit to the region takes place at a difficult time for such requests. U.S. relations with Gulf allies, particularly Saudi Arabia, are under new strains because of differences over Iran, the wars in Syria and Yemen, and Obama's public complaints that allies are not carrying their weight. Carter asked the Gulf countries to help with the reconstruction of the Iraqi cities of Ramadi and Hit, as well as Anbar province, areas clawed back from the Islamic State, but now nearly in shambles. A senior Pentagon official said the defense chiefs had a robust discussion, but came to no solid agreements on stepping up aid. Still, the Gulf nations appear to be willing to consider doing more. First, though, leaders of the most Sunni nations have been waiting to see political improvement in Baghdad, with the news that they see as politically sidelining Iraq's minority Sunnis. So far, this country has been unsatisfied with what the Gulf nations have been willing to do in the fight against the Islamic State, both militarily and financially. Saudis, in turn, have bristled at Obama's suggestion that they share the neighborhood with Iran, which they see as their foe. A senior Obama administration official said the president's view on Iran were the subject of much conversation in Wednesday morning's meeting. The president restated that he believes it's in the whole region's interest to lower tensions between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The president and the king also discussed human rights, the official said, noting that the meeting lasted longer than the White House expected. Still, there were signs that Obama's welcome upon arrival in Saudi Arabia was less than enthusiastic. Stepping off of Air Force One, he was greeted not by King Salman, but by a lower-ranking royal prince Faisal bin Bandar, the governor of Riyadh. That move was unusual and was intended to send a message that the royal family has little faith in Obama, and Mustafa Alani, a security analyst at the Gulf Research Center. Obama ended his day with a late meeting with Abu Dhabi's crown prince, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. I got that one, I think.
It sounded good to me. Malcolm X dig yields a surprise from Boston. An archaeological dig at the boyhood home of Malcolm X in Boston has turned up some surprising findings, but they're unrelated to the early life of the slain civil rights activist. City archaeologist Joseph Bagley said this week that researchers digging outside the 2.5-story home have found kitchenware, ceramics, and other evidence of a settlement dating to the 1700s that they hadn't expected to find. We have come onto a whole layer, roughly 2 feet down and across the whole site, that's absolutely filled with stuff from that period, he said. So we have this whole new research question, which is, what the heck was going on here in the 18th century? Rodney Collins, a nephew of Malcolm X's who grew up in the house with him, says the findings reveal a richer story than he ever knew. It's fantastic and enlightening. This is the history of Boston, he said. It's a terrific educational opportunity, and that's what this family is all about. That's what Uncle Malcolm was about. The 2-week dig, which began March 29th, was meant to shine a light on the Omaha-born Malcolm X's formative years in Boston, as well as the home's previous owners, an Irish immigrant family that lived there through the Great Depression. But it was halted last week because of bad weather. It is to resume again May 16th. City records show the house was built in 1874 on what Bagley and his team had assumed was farmland. But their early findings suggested there was another house on or near the site dating to colonial times. Researchers also found a small stone piece that may date to Native American tribes that once inhabited the city. What has been found so far from Malcolm X's time in Boston, including toys and a record, probably date to when the home was vandalized in the 70s and items were tossed haphazardly into the yard, Bagley said. Here's Jack.
Very good. Here's some news from Belgium. 6 British World War I soldiers have been reburied more than 100 years after they fell in a battle on Flanders fields. The bodies were discovered in 2013 in the city of Ypres, Belgium, and then embarked on a long journey of identification, some of it based on DNA provided by relatives. Only 2 of the 6 were identified. They were reburied on Wednesday. The bodies of the unidentified soldiers will rest in the same Ypres Extension Cemetery next to their comrades, but in graves marked only as a soldier of the Great War. The men had originally been buried and their graves marked with a wooden cross, but the grave disappeared in subsequent fighting. Thousands of soldiers still remain buried deep in the mud in the battlegrounds of Western Belgium. And this from Afghanistan. The death toll from Tuesday's Taliban attack in Kabul rose sharply overnight from 28 to 64, according to the Afghan Interior Ministry. General Abdul Rahman Rami, Kabul's police chief, said Wednesday that 2 teams have been appointed to investigate the attack. He added that most of the casualties were civilians. The attackers targeted an agency that provides protection for high-ranking government officials, similar to the U.S. Secret Service. From Paris, France, this news: France's government is calling for a 2-month extension of the state of emergency that was declared after the deadly November 13th attacks in Paris, the country's prime minister said yesterday. The move, which will require Parliament's approval, is intended to cover the European Championship soccer tournament and the Tour de France. Prime Minister Manuel Valls said that the extension of the state of emergency until the end of July will allow a better response against the terrorism threat during the June 10th to July 12th tournament. After attacks in Brussels last month, concerns have been raised that Euro 2016 could be targeted, especially the fan zones where spectators gather to watch games on large screens. Up to 8 million fans are expected to visit the open-air areas, according to French officials. The state of emergency is scheduled to end on May 26th. It expands police powers to carry out arrests and searches and allows authorities to impose restrictions on the movement of people or vehicles. And for Monterrey, Mexico, the slayings of 9 men at a drug house in northern Mexico were motivated by a debt of about $460, officials said. The weekend killings in the Apodaca suburb of the northern city of Monterrey shocked area residents. The mayor revealed Wednesday that the man survived the attack by plain dead, and that he has provided investigators with key information.
Thank you, Jack. 10:18 is the time. Veto of Bible as Tennessee's official book survives from Nashville, Tennessee. Tennessee has a state reptile, a state rock, and a state song. For now, though, the Bible will not be its official state book. Governor Bill Haslam last week vetoed a bill that would have elevated the holy book status. Wednesday's lawmakers trying to override that veto fell 7 votes short of the 50 they needed in the House after 2 hours of spirited and spiritual debate. And 3 are charged with crimes in the Flint water crisis from Flint, Michigan. The Flint water crisis became a criminal case Wednesday when 2 state regulators and a city employee were charged over the lead contamination that alarmed the country and prompted cries of racism. Michael Prispy, a former district engineer with the State Department of Environmental Quality, and Stephen Bush, a supervisor in the department's drinking water office, were charged with misconduct, conspiracy, tampering with test results, and violations of clean water law. Some of the charges are felonies. Flint Utilities Administrator Michael Glasgow, who oversaw day-to-day operations at the city's water plant at the time, also was charged Wednesday. He was accused of tampering with evidence for allegedly falsifying water testing results and of willful neglect of duty. Bush is on paid leave. Prispy recently took another job at the agency, and Glasgow was placed on leave Wednesday. And a Florida zookeeper in a tiger attack has died from a neck injury from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. A Palm Beach zoo worker killed during a tiger attack, died from a neck injury, and now the tiger she cared for is facing death threats, according to new details of the investigation disclosed Wednesday. Stacy Conweiser, age 37, was killed Friday by an endangered Malayan tiger. Palm Beach County Medical Examiner Michael Bell on Wednesday wouldn't say whether she was bitten or injured in another way by the tiger. Here's Jack.
Very good. It's now 20 minutes after 10 o'clock in the morning. That has us moved from international and national news to local and state news. This comes from Fremont, Nebraska. As the Union Pacific locomotive rolled across the Downing Street crossings Wednesday afternoon, southeast of town, a pickup truck stopped at the crossing arms. That doesn't always happen. This is a really bad crossing in the morning, said Ed Abu, age 51 of Omaha, the train's engineer. Motorists often try to drive around the crossing arms when a train is approaching, especially when drivers are headed to work. That's an inviting disaster. But every 3 hours in the United States, a collision occurs between a train and a vehicle or pedestrian. In 2015, there were more than 700 railroad-related deaths in the United States, according to data from Operation Lifesaver, which is a railroad safety advocacy group. Wanting to educate the public about grade crossing and pedestrian safety, Union Pacific Railroad and Operation Lifesaver Nebraska worked with the Dodge County Sheriff's Office yesterday to highlight the problem. It's an awareness program to make the public aware of what actually goes on out there. On the railroad track, said Carol Daly, who's Operation Lifesaver Nebraska's executive director. The problem seems more pronounced in the Fremont area, organizers said. Drivers don't yield. They go around lowered crossing arms. They walk along the tracks. In 2013, a Union Pacific train en route to Council Bluffs from North Platte struck a vehicle at the Downing Street crossing after the driver went around the crossing arm and onto the tracks, resulting in at least one hospitalization. In 2008, a Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad train in Fremont struck a man sleeping on the track who suffered severe leg injuries. He was flown by helicopter to an Omaha hospital. Trespassing on the tracks is a particular problem nationwide, organizers said. Back in 2015, 486 of the nation's fatalities were from people trespassing on railroad property. That can be someone walking along the tracks or a photographer taking a picture of a train and misjudging the distance. If you are on or near a railroad track, you probably shouldn't be, said Callie Height, who's a spokeswoman for Union Pacific. Even if you think you are at a safe distance, you may not be. Union Pacific Police issued one crossing violation citation and 2 warnings during Wednesday's effort. And this news comes from, from Omaha, actually, and it's an example of an article I just read. The pickup truck that crashed into a ravine earlier this month near 108th and Blondo streets, killing its 3 passengers, was traveling 100 miles per hour when it left the roadway, according to officials. The Douglas County Sheriff's Office made public autopsy results on the 3 people who were killed. All died from blunt force trauma injuries. Officials said Baker, one of the people, had THC, which is called psychoactive substance in marijuana, in his system, and a blood alcohol level of 0.268, more than 3 times the legal limit for drivers. Baker was driving the Chevy Silverado south on 180th when it left the roadway and ended up 350 feet south of Blondo in a ravine. Rodriguez and Patron, who were dating, were wearing seatbelts. Baker was not, officials have said. All 3 were sitting in the front seat. Before the crash, the 3 had spent time in various bars late April 2nd and early April 3rd in Omaha and western Iowa. Baker's girlfriend reported them missing on April 3rd. An Omaha police helicopter spotted the pickup on the afternoon of April 5th after a police detective assigned to Baker's missing persons case asked the pilot to search in the area. Baker lived in the Elkhorn area. The truck was spotted about 4 miles from Baker's home. Yep.
Thank you, Jack. In the Nebraska legislature, a win for DACA youth, a loss for Ricketts. From Lincoln. Alejandra Ayotitla listened to every word of a 2-hour debate in the Nebraska legislature that had the potential to decide whether she someday works as a psychologist in her home state. When lawmakers voted 31-13 Wednesday to narrowly override a veto by Governor Pete Ricketts, elation washed over the 20-year-old psychology major at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. "I'm very happy that it passed," said Ayotitla, who was brought to the United States illegally as a child. "It means I can get a professional license to practice in Nebraska." The outcome was much less satisfying for Ricketts. He lost the showdown with the legislature, but the governor said he has no doubt that his veto was in line with the views held by most Nebraskans. "We laid out the case the best we could," Ricketts said. Senators voted to reject the veto and give immigrants brought to the country illegally as children the chance to obtain professional and commercial licenses. A veto override requires a minimum of 30 votes. State Senator Heath Mello of Omaha, who sponsored Legislative Bill 947, said the issue wasn't about immigration, but about permitting skilled, educated people to use their training while they have federal permission to remain in the country. "We're talking about the future of our state," Mello said. "We're talking about what kind of economy we want. We're talking about what kind of communities we want to go back to tomorrow." The vote to override the Republican governor also relied heavily on conservative support. More than half of the override votes, 17 in total, were cast by Republicans who serve in the officially nonpartisan single House legislature. At a time of 3% statewide unemployment, many conservatives said they viewed passage of the bill as a way to help fill job vacancies in the roughly 170 professional and trade occupations that require a state license. The measure had the support of pro-business and agriculture groups, as well as Lincoln, Greater Omaha, and Nebraska Chambers of Commerce. Employers in Broken Bow, Gothenburg, and Lexington are begging for licensed employees, welders, electricians, engineers, said Senator Matt Williams of Gothenburg, who also represents Lexington, a community where more than half of the residents are Latino. Here's Jack.
Here's some news from the Omaha public school system. Teams of engineers and architects will start combing through Omaha schools this spring and summer, checking for cracked foundations, faulty wires, and boilers that might need replacement. Results of these inspections will help Omaha public schools to build an inventory of school conditions and to plan for repairs. That's information district officials said is sorely needed as OPS budgets for future maintenance and contemplates a follow-up to the bond measure that voters approved in 2014. The work is expected to be more comprehensive and more expensive than past building assessments conducted in the district every 5 years. While we have kept track of the condition of the building, we have not been able to dedicate this level of financial resources to on-the-ground thorough assessments, said OPS spokeswoman Monique Farmer. In March, the OPS school board approved a $720,000 contract with DLR Group to conduct the in-depth inspections and catalog the physical state of 65 schools, which total 7.9 million square feet. The final contract scaled back the number of schools to be inspected after school board members raised concerns about cost and scope, asking why inspections would be needed for schools now undergoing bond-funded repairs. OPS has about 90 buildings. The 65 won't include schools already slated for bond work. Board member Justin Wayne was a lone dissenting vote, in part because he said the contract should have been rebid after the scope was changed to include fewer buildings and a lower price. The DLR work is considerably more expensive than the past building assessments. The last one was back in 2014, completed by RDG Planning and Design. It cost $110,000, but that didn't include an on-site inspection. Instead, school custodians and the building staff members met with the architects and engineers and went through a checklist of conditions. Now, at each school, a team of architects, a civil engineer, a mechanical engineer, and an electrical engineer will check different parts of the school's infrastructure, from lights to sidewalks to plumbing. They'll take photos and use district documents and conversation with principals and building engineers to create snapshots of different school features. This carpet was installed in 2004 and is fraying, or this elevator has been repaired 5 times in the past 2 years. Each school feature will be assigned a repair level and priority, indicating whether it's new and still in good shape or needs replacement as soon as possible. The DLK also is to provide the cost estimates for each needed updates, repairs, or replacements. OPS officials have said the exercise is a critical step towards getting the district to look long-term at building maintenance and repairs. Whether it's planning for another bond or planning for how to pay for future upgrades and maintenance, it just gives us kind of a nice baseline for planning in the future, board member Katie Underwood said. In 2014, the district asked voters to back a $421,000 million bond package aimed at upgrading dozens of schools, some of which lacked central air, wireless internet, and modern security features. Others had heating and cooling systems that dated back decades, or rows of waterlogged ceiling tiles. The most recent OPS bond measure before that was in 1999. Some asked why OPS had waited so long between bond measures, letting repair costs pile up. Thinking about the comments that I know and I heard from constituents when we were going through this bond in 2014, where's your routine maintenance? Where's your scheduling then? And that's something that we haven't had a district board president, Luann Gooding, said last month. The 2015 audit of the district's buildings and grounds division also pointed out the need for more long-term capital planning. At a council for Great City Schools Conference, Underwood said she heard a statistic that stuck with her, namely, every dollar spent on preventive maintenance can save $4 in future building costs. I just think it's a no-brainer for being responsible with taxpayer dollars, especially for a large district that has a lot of building stock, she said. Officials have said several factors contributed to the building backlog, including a lack of state funds for school infrastructure, legal battles over the one study, one school district plan, and a superintendent turnover. The district did use stimulus funds for some projects, including construction of Gateway Elementary and Davis Middle School. The schools are the newest in OPS and opened in 2013. The district also budgets money in a special building fund for repairs and new construction. Board members have discussed asking voters to approve a second bond measure at some point, possibly next spring. DLR will try out its inspection and reporting process at 3 schools. If OPS approves, teams will continue at the rest of the buildings. The contract calls for this work to be wrapped up by September.
Thank you, Jack. From the Nebraska legislature, time is up for 11 senators, end of the session, and of the tenure of some key legislative leaders. From Lincoln. The 2016 legislative session ended Wednesday with praise for a job well done and 11 term-limited senators saying goodbye. Nebraska Governor Pete Ricketts called the session very successful and pointed to lawmakers acting on a number of his priorities, holding spending growth to 3.6%, delivering property tax relief, and defeating Medicaid expansion for the 4th time. Speaker of the legislature, Galen Hadley of Kearney, praised the accomplishments as well, listing continued prison reform, property tax relief, roads funding, and the revamping of the learning community. I do believe we have accomplished a lot, he said. All told, Hadley said, lawmakers passed 216 bills this year and enacted an additional 66 by amending them into legislation that passed. All but 4 of the bills named as priorities had their chance for debate. Hadley urged returning senators to act quickly on those bills next year. But the speaker also warned that next year's legislature will need to decide how to handle filibusters, which became increasingly common this year. He said lawmakers voted a record 24 times this year on motions to end the filibuster. That compared to 13 such votes last year and 9 in 2014. There were 6 such votes in 2013 and 3 in 2012 and 2011. I just wonder if we're becoming a 33-vote legislature, Hadley said, referring to the number of votes needed to cut off a filibuster. State Senator Heath Mello of Omaha agreed, saying that the stalling tactic made the short 60-day session feel longer and more arduous than any other during his 8 years. It is bittersweet to leave, seeing that it may be changing for the worst in regards to over-reliance on filibusters, he said. When I was elected, the focus was on trying to get people who disagreed to sit down and work through it to build consensus. The departing state senators include Hadley, Mello, and 9 others. Among them are 5 of the 14 chairs of standing legislative committees. Some plan to return to politics and elected office, including one who aims to be governor one day, and another who might be looking at a state office. For others, the end of their time in the legislature is the end of their political life. And here are the folks that are retiring. Galen Hadley from Kearney, Dave Bloomfield from Hoskins, Kathy Campbell from Lincoln, Colby Koesch from Lincoln, Tanya Cook, Omaha, Mike Glore, Grand Island, Ken Haar, Malcolm, Bo McCoy, Omaha, Heath Mello, Omaha, Ken Shills, Ogallala, and Kate Sullivan from Cedar Rapids. Here's Jack.
Thank you. Back to Omaha, as far as the news for this morning's newspaper. City officials cut the ribbon Wednesday on a $5.25 million street maintenance yard at 18th and James Street in Northeast Omaha. The maintenance yard will be responsible for the area from east of 52nd Street and north of Leavenworth. Previously, city maintenance employees serving Northeast Omaha had worked out of a yard at 26th and Lake Streets. The anti-graffiti team and a satellite division of sewer maintenance also will be based at the James Street yard, officials said. Prairie Construction of Omaha began work on the new yard more than a year ago. Among those attending the ribbon cutting were the mayor, city council president Ben Gray, and street maintenance engineer Austin Rouser. Rouser called the new yard a state-of-the-art facility. It includes an almost 20,000 square foot garage that will house equipment, vehicles, and office space. A 16,000 square foot materials building and 1,000 square foot brine mixing facility that serves a 90,000 gallon brine storage tank. It's a more modern facility that will allow us to get out on the main route sooner or northeast Omaha, Robert said. It's much more efficient from a traffic standpoint. The City Public Works Department also operates street maintenance yards of 96th and F, 52nd and Dayton, 87th and Vernon, and 205th and Park Road in Elkhorn. And this news from the metro area. A bus driver for the Omaha Public Schools used CPR on a student who wasn't breathing Wednesday morning. At about 8 o'clock in the morning, a Douglas County 911 dispatcher said a school bus was pulled over at 120th and Military because a student on the bus was unconscious and not breathing. The driver was performing CPR. At 8 o'clock that morning, the dispatcher said the student was coughing and breathing. Everton Fire Rescue had responded, and the student was taken to Children's Hospital and Med Center in serious condition. Monique Farmer, and public school spokeswoman, said the bus was en route to J.P. Lloyd School near 44th and Farnham. About 30 students, aged 5 through 21, attend the school, which serves those with mental and physical disabilities. The school principal was contacted, Farmer said, and the principal contacted the students' parents. OPS bus drivers are required to take first aid, and CPR training. Farmer said she was unable to provide information about the student's condition because of privacy rules. And this news about a teenager who was riding a stolen motorcycle in Council Bluffs crashed Tuesday night and died after fleeing from authorities. Bluffs police said an Iowa Department of Transportation motor vehicle enforcement officer attempted to stop two motorcycles on Big Lake Road near the Pottawatomie County Jail around 10 o'clock in the evening. Both motorcycles fled from the officer heading west on Nash Boulevard. The driver of one of the bikes, a 2006 Yamaha, lost control of the motorcycle about 3 blocks west of the intersection of 16th and Nash Boulevard. He was identified Wednesday as 18-year-old Lance McCormick of Carter Lake. The motorcycle went over a curb, struck a fence supporting the roadway at Interstate 29. McCormick was thrown from the motorcycle. The second motorcycle left the area. The Iowa Department of Transportation officer stopped and rendered aid after the crash, according to police. The Yamaha motorcycle was stolen, police said. The other motorcyclist is still missing as of yesterday afternoon.
Thank you, Jack. Excuse me. Talk by fake black woman raises a fuss. A UNMC professor has sparked controversy in arranging an Omaha appearance by Rachel Dolezal, who resigned as president of the NAACP chapter in Washington State last year after it emerged that she is white. The event that Dr. Renessa S. Anthony organized was an invitation-only dinner attended by 25 people, she said. Attendees included the University of Nebraska Medical Center faculty and students and people from the community. The dinner was a private part of a series of events in the University of Nebraska Medical Center initiative called Race Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity. Anthony is an assistant professor at the UNMC College of Public Health and deputy director of the UNMC Center for Reducing Health Disparities. The invitation to Dolezal set off a public backlash on social media Wednesday. Many African Americans especially criticized the decision to bring Dolezal to Omaha to discuss race. Anthony welcomed the controversy. Isn't it great, she said Wednesday, it's time that we talk about race, inclusion, diversity, and equity starting in my own backyard. Anthony said minorities are underrepresented in UNMC's faculty and students, and said Omaha and Nebraska have disparities in health among whites, African Americans, and Hispanics. She said people in Omaha don't talk about race, but must do so if they're going to address those issues. I can't get people who have power and influence and authority at UNMC in a room to talk about race, Anthony said. In Dolezal, she said she found a polarizing national figure. She sought to attract people's attention and start a conversation. The event started a conversation, but not the one Anthony says she wanted, said Peggy Jones, an assistant professor in the Black Studies Department and associate director of the Women and Gender Studies at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. No one's saying anything about medical disparities, only why the hell was this woman brought in, Jones said. She, Anthony, seemed to be mistaking justified outrage for conversation. Dolezal engendered outrage nationally last summer. She was president of the Spokane, Washington chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People when her parents revealed that she is white. It also was learned that Dolezal had sued historically Black Howard University, alleging the school discriminated against her because she is white. Dolezal continued to assert that she identified as Black. Last week, she revealed in an interview on national TV that she is working on a book about racial identity. She has now gotten a book deal for being a fake Black woman when a real Black woman can't get a book deal, Jones said. Jones said she's infuriated and saddened not only that Anthony brought Dolezal to Omaha to speak about race, but also that the UNMC doctor didn't talk to her or other Black women who work in a related field in Omaha about the event beforehand. Jones said she and others would have advised against bringing Dolezal to town.
Well, it's probably about obituary time, I think.
I think you're right, Jack.
To 11, gives us 15 minutes. It's about average time, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Starting off with the obituary from the Omaha in the World Herald. The first one, Barger, William Timothy, known as Tim Barger, age 74. Evie Hoffman is in charge of the funeral arrangements. Memorials will be directed by the family. Barker, Joseph Barker III, age 79. Evie Hoffman is in charge, and memorials may be made to All Saints Episcopal Church or the Big Brothers, Big Sisters of the Midlands. Marshall Travers, Lois L. Marshall Travers, age 97. Evie Hoffman is in charge, and memorials may be made to a charity of your choice. Bernard, I think it's Barbara L. Bernard, age 67. Evie Hoffman is handling the arrangements, and memorials may be made to the Newman Center at University of Nebraska at Lincoln. Blowmaker, Blanche M. Blowmaker, age 99 of Fremont. The Ludwigson Mortuary in Fremont is in charge of the arrangements, and memorials may be made to her church, which is the Good Shepherd Lutheran Church in Fremont. Chaffin, Lawrence Wesley Chaffin, age 77. Color O'Neill Meyer Woodring Funeral Home is in charge. That's located in Council Bluffs. I don't see any memorials. Next one, Colanino. E. Gay Colanino, age 80. Crosby Burka Swanson Golden Colonial Chapel is in charge, and memorials may be made to the Operation Smile program. Douglas, Emily, known as Amy with an I, Douglas, age 69. Gentleman is in charge, and memorials are suggested to the family for a future memorial garden in her name. Irwin, Mary F. Irwin, age 69. The Woodland Mortuary is in charge of the arrangements. Frost, Marcel E., as known as Elaine Gum Frost of, I guess of Omaha. Let's see here. She died in Spokane, Washington. Let me see. Donations may be made to the Unity Church of Omaha, 3424 North 90th Street here in Omaha. Next one, Garton Bartley is the last name. Kathy Garton Bartley, age 64. Forest Lawn Funeral Home is handling the arrangements. Henderson, Jean Henderson, age 84. Evie Hoffman is in charge. How, let me see, Houghtaling, I'll spell that Houghthaling. Harry E., Senior Master Sergeant in the Air Force, retired. Houghtaling, age 81. The Belleville Memorial Chapel of Evie Hoffman is handling the arrangements. Jennings, Roderick Barnard, known as Big Daddy. Jennings, age 51. There'll be a memorial celebration tomorrow at the Starlight Chateau Center at 1310 North and 29th Street. There's no mortuary given. There's no mortuary given. Okay. Kellum, maybe it's Kellium, Kelium. Janie M., main name is Hickman. Kellium, age 78. The Woodland Mortuary at their Ames Chapel is handling the funeral arrangements. I don't see any memorials here, or I don't see memorials here. Okay. Next one, Klessig, Klessig. Agnes Kotlik Klessig, age 104. Crosby Brookins Quantum Golden Colonial Chapel is handling the funeral arrangements. Says all friends are welcome. She'll be interred at the Bohemian National Cemetery, and the celebration of her life will be held Saturday at the Crosby Colonial Chapel at 119th and Center Road. To spell that Kletke, Kletke. Stacy M. Kletke, age 57. The Roller Mortuary is in charge of the arrangements. Memorials may be made to the American Cancer Society. Lyle, Evelyn D. Lyle, age 46. The Roder Mortuary is in charge at their Ames Chapel. Let's see. Next one, Namath, Gabriel Michael Namath, age 12, of Fort Calhoun, Nebraska. The Seaver Sprick Funeral Home in Fort Calhoun is in charge of the funeral arrangements. In lieu of traditional remembrance and memorials are suggested to the Namath family. Neubauer, Mary Jo, maiden name is Weirs, W-I-E-R-S. Neubauer, age 70. Even Hoffman is in charge. Novak Jr., Edward A. Novak Jr., age 61. The Bellevue Memorial Chapel of Heaphy Hoffman is in charge. Peterson, Judith D. Peterson, age 76. The Colorado Mortuary is in charge of the funeral arrangements. Let me see. The family would like to thank Holly. His first name is Ha, last name is L.E. Lee, with hospice for her care. Celebration of her life. Let me see. There will be a short ceremony and food this coming. I better start over again. There's a lot to read here, and I can't necessarily make sense of the whole thing. They will see the Soaring Winds Winery at 138th Street in Springfield will officiate a short ceremony and food, refreshments, music, and friends to follow. Please send donations to the Springfield First United Methodist Church in Springfield, Nebraska. Again, the Colorado Mortuary is handling the arrangements. Radick, R-A-D-I-K, Bonnie Lee Matheson, Radick, age 82. The Corisco Larkin Staskevich Funeral Home is in charge. Memorials may be made to the St. Jude Hospital or to the Children's Hospital. Salisbury, Michael J. Salisbury, age 69. The Corisco Larkin Staskevich Funeral Home is in charge of the funeral arrangements. Next one, Steimer, Glenn A. Steimer, age 80. Heaphy Hoffman is in charge. The memorials may be made to the Nebraska Humane Society or the Omaha Police Foundation. Sullivan, Kyle Scott Sullivan, age 29, of Colorado Springs, Colorado. Memorials may be sent to Lavis Sullivan. His first name is spelled L-E-A-V-I-S, Sullivan. Post Office Box is in Post Office Box 1698 in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. The request no flowers, please. Memorial Fund has been established in Kyle's name to help fulfill his pledge to help end homelessness. Tadlock, Mabel F. Tadlock, age 79. The Bethany Funeral Home is in charge of the arrangements. Thorngren, Patricia Joe Thorngren, age 72. Memorials may be made to Make-A-Wish Foundation or the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Evie Hoffman is in charge. Timmons, James Austin Timmons, age 87. Evie Hoffman is handling the arrangements. Next one is Tomerlin, Tomerlin. David Wayne Tomerlin, age 45. There's no mortuary given, but there will be a burial at Forest Lawn Cemetery. Services will be at noon tomorrow at Trinity Lutheran Church. Warthen, Mary, known as Lois Warthen, age 91. The Bremen Mortuary is in charge of the funeral arrangements. There's no memorial shown. And the last one, obituary of Omaha World Herald, is Welch, with W-E-L-C-H, Mary A. Welch, age 70. The Thomas Funeral Home is handling the funeral arrangements. And those are the obituaries from the Omaha World Herald.
Thank you, Jack. The time is 10:57, and here are the deaths and funerals in the Journal Star. The first is Andre Darlene Hirschberger Andre, age 87, passed away March 30th. She was born September 1928 in Beaver Crossing. The cemetery is Palm Eastern Mortuary in Las Vegas, Nevada. Barton, Gary Lee Barton of Haddam, Kansas. Born January 1939, passed away April 17th, age 76. Bolke, John Bolke, B-O-H-L-K-E, age 73, of Hastings, passed away April 19th. Services will be 10 a.m. Friday at Hastings First Presbyterian Church. Fiddler, F-I-D-L-E-R, Cora Jane Fiddler, age 90, of Wahoo, died April 18th, born October 1925 in Memphis. In lieu of flowers, memorials to the First United Methodist Church in Wahoo and of Marcy Swoboda is the funeral home. Fisher, F-I-S-C-H-E-R, Doris M. Fisher, age 89, of Lincoln, died April 17th, and that's Bethuras Mazer and Love Funeral Home. Glathar, G-L-A-T-H-A-R, Lou Minor Glathar, age 92, passed away April 18th. He was a farmer, it says, and that is Wary Mortuary. Humboldt, Guayardo, G-U-A-J-A-R-D-O, Isabel Guayardo, age 80, of Lincoln, died April 16th, born July 1935 in Lincoln. Memorials are suggested to America Needs Fatima, and Bethuras Mazer and Love Funeral Home is listed. Halverson, Christopher S. Halverson, age 30, of Syracuse, passed away April 17th, born November 1985 in Lincoln. Memorials are suggested to the family for a scholarship in Christopher's name, and arrangements by Fusselman Allen Harvey Funeral Home, Syracuse, Nebraska. Hasbrook, spelled H-A-S-B-R-O-U-C-K -Bors, B-O-R-S. Kimberly A. Hasbrook Bors of Fairbury, born August 1973, passed away April 17th, age 42. Hauser Vaverka, Liam, Michael, Joe Hauser Vaverka of Lincoln, died April 27th. Heaps, H-E-A-P-S, Nettie Sue Heaps, maiden name Bozeman, passed away April 16th, born June 1934 in Russellville, Alabama. Flowers may be sent in care of Bethuras Mazer and Love Funeral Home, and memorials in care of the family. Heidemann, Lola L. Heidemann, age 86, of Tecumseh, died April 17th. Memorials to Family's Choice and Hemmingson Funeral Home, Auburn, is listed. Jackson, Roger E. Jackson, age 84, of York, passed away April 18th. He was in the Naval Air Reserves. That'll be Metz Mortuary, York. Kendrick, Larry Eugene Kendrick, age 60 of Lincoln, passed away April 19th, born July 1955 in Albion. Memorials to his church, that is the Bethlehem Covenant Church in Waverly, and the funeral home is Roper and Sons. Kabza, Joseph B. Kabza, age 80 of Lamp, Missouri, formerly of Ulysses, and Schuyler, passed away April 18th in Springfield, Missouri, born November 1935 in Ulysses. Memorials to the Kabza family for future designation. Funeral home is Zabka Funeral Home. Mack, Suzette K. Mack of Ogallala, born August 1950, passed away April 17th, age 65. Moritz, M-O-R-I-T-Z. Douglas Eugene Moritz, age 78 of Lincoln, formerly of Arcata, California, passed away April 3rd in Lincoln, born March 1938 in Deschler, and that is Aspen Aftercare. Mueller, Rosaline M. Mueller of Tecumseh, born August 1929, passed away April 18th, age 86. Neighbor, N-A-B-E-R, Mary Lou Neighbor, age 77 of Tecumseh, died April 19th, born January 12th, 1939. Funeral home on that is Worry Mortuary, Tecumseh. Payne, Dustin A. Payne, age 21 of Lincoln, passed away April 17th, and that's Volsky Funeral Home, Seward. Rorabaugh, R-O-R-A-B-A-U-G-H, Eugene A. Rorabaugh, age 89 of Winthrop, Iowa, died April 19th, and that's Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home. Sullivan, Kyle Scott Sullivan, age 29 of Colorado Springs, Colorado, formerly of Charleston, South Carolina, and Omaha. Lyle was born February 1987 in Lincoln. A memorial will follow at a later date in Charleston, South Carolina. The family requests no flowers, please. A memorial fund has been established in Kyle's name to help fulfill his pledge to help end homelessness. Send donations to Lee Avis Sullivan, P.O. Box 1698, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, 29465. And it does not show a funeral. Wagoner, Joyce E. Wagoner of Crete, born June 1937, passed away April 18th, age 78. Waite, W-A-I-T-E, Mary Ann Waite, died April 17th. She was 86 years old. Let's see. In memorial donations may be sent to the Holy Spirit Adoration Sisters, also known as Pink Sisters, at 1040 South Cotner Boulevard, Lincoln, 68510. She will be buried at Queen of Heaven Catholic Mortuary. And the last is Wright, W-R-I-G-H-T, Lois Elaine Wright, age 92 of North Platte, formerly of Lincoln, died April 15th. That is Odine Colonial Chapel, North Platte, in charge of arrangements and memorials to Premier Estates in North Platte. Those are the deaths and funerals in the Lincoln Journal-Star.
Thank you, Bill. Listeners' memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and will go a long way in keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind. Memorials are listed as donor's choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent here to the Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205. Here in Omaha, Nebraska, and the zip code here is 68152. Thank you very much for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter.
Jack and I will be right back. We hope you will be too. Here's Paul.
Thank you very much, Bill Eberhard and Jack Gibbs, for reading the first hour from the Omaha World Herald. We'll be back after, as Bill just indicated, we take a short break, and the first thing we'd like to do is to play the home delivery meal menus for those listeners who need that information. Here with today's home delivery menu is Ann Pelican. Welcome, Ann.
Well, we got through that.
Yeah, one to go, huh? Or part of one. I can't.
I'm not sure I understand this cartoon here. I mean,
I think
a little bit, but
it's got to do with Cabela's.
Yeah.
And the big.
but what it's what's said. That isn't the fishing trip I had in mind. And there's big shark is going to take him, I guess.
If you're dealing with vision loss or blindness, you'll want to join
I kind of think of they think Cabela's is kind of a small deal, but the big boys are going to come and get it. I don't
I
know.
don't know. I just kind of, I could probably read a couple, three things in there. And I mean,
Yeah.
fish should be one of them. I'm not sure of what he's saying. This is what I had in mind. What did he have in mind? He loves Sydney. Okay.
Yeah. I think he wanted a sunfish or something.
Yeah.
Oh,
Do you fish, or have you fished, or do you fish?
I did when I was a boy, but we had a river about a mile from
Oh, yeah?
town. Middle Loop River. And it wasn't any fish in it.
Somebody already caught them all, huh?
Yeah. We, my dad and I used to go out there, and we very seldom caught any fish. Usually I was out piddling around, trying to catch frogs and whatever, turtles, looking for turtles.
This is when you were a 12-year-old or something like that?
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
My dad was kind of when he was young, loved fishing, hunting, and he was a good shot as far
Oh,
as
yeah.
I couldn't hit anything hardly.
Well, so you went fishing and hunting with your dad, I mean.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Got a couple of ducks.
Oh, yeah.
My dad always dreamed of getting a goose. Now these geese are everywhere, you know? Those
Getting a
Canadian
what?
geese. A goose.
A goose?
Yeah, he
A goose in I didn't know. I mean, really?
They're everywhere now. They weren't nearly so.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
And of course, it depends on what part of the state you live in too.
Yeah, I
know,
suppose
if
in the middle
If you're
of it.
in one of those flyways, you're in luck.
Yeah.
Nebraska for over 41 years. The Radio Talking Book Network is brought to you with the cooperation of KILS-FM in Omaha and statewide with facilities at NET Radio and Television. Now let's return to our readers for the second hour reading from today's Omaha World Herald. Let's welcome back the River Hart and Jack Gibbs.
Thank you very much there, Paul.
We're back. Thank you, Paul.
We're back to read some more news. Starting off with the obituaries. It was an old, isn't it?
Yeah.
Editorials. I know
There
it was a long word. Editorials and public post kind of letters. So those usually pretty interesting. I've always thought it talks about people who are out there as citizens and as writers. In this case, this is written by Eli Lake, and he writes for the Bloomberg View. The U.S.-Saudi relationship appears to be on the rocks. Most recently, the rift of 9/11 has been reopened. This month, 60 Minutes reported on the still classified final chapter of the 2003 Senate report on the attacks, which it said would show that some Saudi officials, charities, and wealthy individuals supported two of the 9/11 hijackers. The Saudi connection is especially relevant now because Congress is considering legislation to allow the families of 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia for damages. Saudi officials are warning the White House that the kingdom would sell off hundreds of billions of dollars worth of U.S. assets if that bill becomes law. Then there is President Barack Obama himself. His signature foreign policy achievement, a nuclear deal with Iran, has removed sanctions on a country that is in proxy war with Saudi Arabia across the region. To make matters worse, Obama has said that the Saudis must learn how to share the Middle East with Iran. A year earlier, he told the New York Times columnist Tom Friedman that the Saudis and other Gulf monarchies faced an internal threat because of the sclerosis of closed political systems. This is the backdrop of Obama's visit this week to Riyadh. But the U.S.-Saudi relationship only appears to be on the rocks. Indeed, despite harsh words about how Saudi Arabia is politically organized and how the Iran agreement enhances its security, the president is doubling down on a partnership that has endured since the 1930s. Obama has deepened military and intelligence ties with the kingdom since he came into office in 2009. Obama doesn't want to look like he is defending an absolute monarchy that won't even let women drive, but in fact, he has been proactive, supportive of that monarchy, as have all of his predecessors, said Bruce Riedel, retired CIA officer. The Congressional Research Service report from February estimates that the U.S. has sold Saudi Arabia nearly $100 billion worth of fighter aircraft, helicopters, naval vessels, missile defense systems, and things like that for war purposes and defense purposes. On the sensitive issue of electronic eavesdropping, the Obama administration in December of 2012 authorized more training and intelligence sharing between the National Security Agency and Saudi Arabia's Ministries of Defense and Interior. According to an NSA memo published by The Intercept in 2014, the cooperation targeted the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps naval vessels in the Persian Gulf. Retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who served as director of the Defense Intelligence Agency from 2012 to 2014, said that the intelligence partnership with Saudi Arabia was driven by threats in the region. What we saw at the time was a rise of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula and the Iranian desire to take over Yemen from within, backing the Houthi separatists. We need to take bigger steps to give greater insights into the region, and the Saudis were willing to help. In this respect, Saudi Arabia has been an ally of the U.S. in counterterrorism, despite its history in the 1990s of allowing charities, wealthy benefactors, and banks to finance terror groups like al-Qaeda. Saudi Arabia began to seriously target radicals after it suffered 3 major bombings in Riyadh.
I think some people call it Riyadh.
Riyadh, yeah, without the on the end. Okay. In 2003, who's Well, he's one of the spokesman for Reagan. In August, the Saudis arrested Ahmad al-Moghalsi, a key plotter of the 1996 bombing of the Khobar Towers, a barracks for U.S. Air Force personnel in Saudi Arabia. In 2010, Saudi intelligence helped foil a plot from al-Qaeda, Yemen's affiliates, to place printer cartridge bombs on airplanes. Those successes did not come about because the U.S. and Saudi Arabia want the same thing for their respective societies or share common values. They don't. And so Obama's harsh words make sense, but so does his increased support for and cooperation with Saudi Arabia, because both countries today share a common enemy in the terrorists whom the Saudis once allowed to fester.
Thank you, Jack. Here are some letters from the public pulse in the Omaha World Herald, and the first one they call "Be Careful What You Wish For." All of those enthusiastic people supporting Costco building a big chicken processing facility in the beautiful Fremont area, the story was "What's All the Clucking About?" April 17th, should read the World Herald articles about what has happened to other cities where these kinds of plants opened. And that was signed by Warren Hutchinson from Atlantic, Iowa. And the next, Costco should invest in Fremont. If Costco wants to build its chicken processing plant in the Fremont area, it should pay up front for all the highways, roads, sewers, housing, and all other infrastructures it would require, not the taxpayers who will have to pay higher property taxes to support the plan. Costco should also agree to pay at least $25 per hour to all workers so that they can become good citizens and pay taxes, not rely on government assistance. Contributed by Leonard White from Fort Calhoun. The next, a Trumpian idea. With the smoke coming from Kansas and the marijuana coming from Colorado, both of which pose a challenge to our good life in Nebraska, I would suggest we build large walls along our southern and western borders and make Kansas and Colorado pay for them.
Ever since Trump went hell with his wall, everything is referred to, they build walls.
Yeah. The next one they call "Not a Great Listener." OPS board member Yolanda Williams said she has listened to my constituency. The story, 3 will challenge incumbent Williams for seat on OPS board April 15th in the World Herald. One time she pointedly did not listen to the public was at a January board meeting when she walked out on almost 30 speakers from the public. They spoke on both sides of the issue of sex education. According to a World Herald article, Williams said the discussion had become polarized and unproductive. I didn't think so, but even if that were true, it is hardly a reason to walk out on people who have been authorized to speak by the board. Williams touts her listening skills, but maybe she should add the caveat that she's is rather selective. Contributed by James Joseph Enright, Omaha. One more. The more it gets, the more it spends. I find it alarming that the U.S. set a record for federal tax revenues in the first half of the fiscal year, but still managed to have a deficit of nearly $500 billion. I haven't heard any discussion of this from any of the candidates. What I have heard is talk about tax hikes and increased federal spending. If these candidates cannot see the danger in this and make it a top campaign issue, then I think they need to rethink their ability to run our country. Signed, Eric Hammock, Kearney, Nebraska. Here's Jack.
And this editorial is written by Robert Gibbelhoff of the Washington Post newspaper. In 1986, Leroy Reed faced criminal charges he didn't understand. A mentally disabled ex-con from Milwaukee, Reed was charged with illegally possessing a firearm after his parole officer discovered that he had purchased a .22 caliber pistol to go with a mail-order private detective course. While it was obvious to everyone on the jury that he had committed a crime, it was less obvious that he should go back to prison for it. Did he know that what he was doing was wrong? Would a harsh sentence such as reincarceration be just? After hours of frantic argument, captured on film by PBS's Frontline, the jury decided to find Reed not guilty. These citizens were practicing what was called jury nullification, which is a contentious aspect of our legal system, whereby jurors can decide to ignore the law and not convict a person obviously guilty of a crime. Acting as a sort of community conscience, juries can decide that applying the letter of the law to a particular case would not be justified, but it's not clear how much say a jury should have in deciding which laws to enforce. Verdicts that ignore broken laws, such as the decision in the Reed case, are permissible under the Constitution. The Supreme Court affirmed the power of the jury in the 1895 case of Sparf versus United States, arguing that a jury's verdict cannot be questioned by any court due to the so-called double jeopardy clause. Still, courts and prosecutors have long been skeptical of jury nullification. Many see it as a taking away of the power of sentencing discretion from judges. Opponents of jury nullification argue that the power of juries to disregard the law is undemocratic. Laws are developed by elected representatives. They argue not a handful of citizens gathered privately in a room. For that reason, defense attorneys are often prohibited by judges from telling jurors to make a decision contrary to the law. But for proponents of jury powers, nullification is a right afforded to jurors that perform as a check against unjust laws. Although opponents argue that jurors have used nullification irresponsibly, they have also used the power to protect people who violated the Unjust Alien and Sedition Act, the Fugitive Slave Act, and prohibition laws. Advocates of nullification say that jurors should not only be able to ignore the laws when determining the verdict, but that courts should be required to inform them of their right to do so. This bill working its way through the New Hampshire legislature would enact just that, a second attempt at doing so. In 2012, the legislature passed a law that would allow the defense to inform juries of their right to nullify a law, but the state Supreme Court gutted it, saying that nullification wasn't a right. The new legislation goes further than the last, requiring the court itself to make clear a jury's right to nullify a law at the defense attorney's request. There are some bedrock legal concepts at stake in this conflict, and that elicits a debate, namely, how much of a say should juries have in determining the delivery of our criminal laws? Is jury nullification subject to particular biases? And if so, does this make it more or less useful in its role as a check on unfair laws? How would it affect our legal system if more states or the U.S. Supreme Court eventually weighed in to protect jury nullification? I don't think I knew that.
No, nor did I. I thought that was eye-opening.
Yeah.
That's well, the time is 11:20. I guess we can move on to
I
today's
guess so. We
living
went
and
through all that, didn't we?
entertainment. Here's Ask Amy. And she says, son's party comes with costs beyond beer tab. Dear Amy, my stepson recently turned 21. Because he has friends who are minors, his mother warned him about the responsibilities involving the use of liquor. Despite this, he directly defied her and invited friends over the first night we were away from home. There was plenty of drinking involved, and some of his friends took it upon themselves to ransack our house, stealing money, jewelry, and family heirlooms. Good night. My wife and I lost more than $20,000 in merchandise, including a coin collection that I had cherished since I was a child. Our stepson was arrested for providing liquors to minors, but none of the other participants were ever prosecuted for the thefts. We were very fortunate that our house was not damaged, and most importantly, no one was injured. Our insurance company also covered half the losses. However, my stance has been that my stepson should reimburse his mother and me for our losses, even if it takes years. My wife maintains that his arrest and court punishment is enough. He completed 40 hours of community service. Reaching out to the parents of his friends has proved fruitless. His decision to party has caused a storm within our family and tension between my wife and me. We have agreed to adhere to your opinion of how this situation should be handled. I feel helpless because he is not legally my son. Signed, an upset stepdad.
Yeah.
Dear upset, your stepson made a terrible mistake, somewhat typical of his age group and maturity level. He was caught, prosecuted, and punished, and in my view, this legal consequence is completely appropriate. You should see a lawyer to explore the possibility of suing these other families for the items stolen from your home, or take them to small claims court. You don't say, but I assume that your stepson is remorseful. At this point, you should choose an additional consequence that might be more symbolic than practical, so that you can close the door on this tough episode. Instead of repaying you $10,000 for your damaged and lost material goods, you and this young man should undertake a project together that would provide a positive incentive to both of you, as well as to help repair your own relationship. I value the work of Habitat for Humanity. Check their website, habitat.org, to find a building project in your community. You and he should spend your Saturdays renovating or building a house together. Doing this will emphasize the value of hearth and home, reminding him of his own advantages. Your job is to forgive him. The next day, Amy, I have a wonderful husband. He does most of the grocery shopping, the cooking, and brings me warm towels from the dryer after my showers. We've been married for 16 years, and I love him. Last year, he started a project at our closest friend's home. He still has not completed it. I tried to tell our friends not to hire him because of all the projects he has started in our home and never finished. I'm not talking about small, unnoticeable projects, but big projects like bathrooms that have been torn up for 10 years. This is affecting our friendship. I'm constantly being put in the middle. Even though I tell them it's not my project, I say they need to confront my husband, not me. When they confront me because he said he was going to finish, or he doesn't call them or show up, I feel angry with both of them. What should I do? Signed, a frustrated wife. Dear wife, it's challenging and confusing when someone as thoughtful and kind as your husband is toward you shows so little regard for the impact of his actions. Your friendship might not be salvageable, unfortunately. This is about boundaries. Whenever your friends contact you, you should connect them directly with him. Don't apologize for your husband, but do acknowledge the awkwardness. You haven't asked, but my amateur instinct is that your husband might have ADHD. A diagnosis, education, coaching, and strategies might be a game changer for him. And the last, dear Amy, the question from Frustrated made my blood boil. Poor Frustrated was a 27-year-old recent graduate living at home and looking for the perfect job while his mom was bugging him every day about employment. What a spoiled brat. He is living in his parents' house. I can't believe you let him off the hook. Signed, also Frustrated. And she replies, dear, also, I suggested that Frustrated, needed to get a job, which is the most efficient way of getting someone to stop bugging you about employment. Here's Jack.
Well, I tell you, those two articles you had, they weren't very much for the young.
No winners.
They'll get together. Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Well, in the living section here, I learned something about the ACT score, I guess. I'm not too familiar with that. I'm familiar with it, but I'm not. Our kids, I don't think we were involved. Is that fairly in the last 20 years?
I think it's in the schools, and they one week or one period of time during the school year they all do an ACT test. I think I don't know any.
I don't. Because our kids are out of college and all. Well, anyway,
Things
I'm
have
gonna read about it,
changed.
see if I can find out.
Okay.
Okay, a higher ACT score means better college choices and scholarships. Graduating with minimal debt. So here are 4 tips for jumping that score. 1, take 4. Have your student take the ACT 4 times. Colleges just care about that highest score, and many will combine the 4 highest subscores, even if they happened on different tests. So have your student take the ACT at least 4 times, unless he or she hammers a 36 right away. And here's the second thing to do: June counts. If your student is a junior, have him or her take the ACT twice this spring, including June 11th. I see big jumps on the June ACT because it's 2 or 3 weeks after finals, the least stressful test date of the 6 offered annually. Have your student prepare for 30 to 45 minutes each day after finals before June 11th, and you'll love the new score. Summer doesn't start until noon on June 11th. Number 3, motivate with money. Boasting that ACT score is the best paying job a high school student should ever have. Joining the so-called 5-point jump club means dramatically better school choices and scholarships. Create motivation by reminding your student that he or she will make much more money in the future by preparing for and boosting the ACT score by that ACT score than by flipping burgers today. And the 4th idea is hammer with grammar. The ACT English and math content are the most predictable and easiest to improve. Have your student hammer the grammar and math questions prior to test day. I synthesized grammar down to 22 easy to master grammar rules. And ACT math is so basic that amnesia is often a high school junior's biggest enemy. Solid practice should bring back the fond memories. Colleges primarily care about the so-called big 3 grade scores and one extracurricular. Students finish strong this semester, jump that April ACT score, and then launch that June ACT score. Spend summer strengthening that extracurricular skill. Hello, better college choices and scholarships. What do you do? I don't understand that article. Kind of take these tests more often. Sounds like so much.
I didn't know you could.
That's not cheating, but I mean, take advantage of something. Well, anyway, those are the John Baylor, whoever he is, has that suggestion on getting ways to get more money or getting into higher schools, I guess is what it is. Well, it says John Baylor. It has a little description of John Baylor. He is a father, husband, author, Stanford grad, and broadcaster based in Lincoln. He is the owner of John Baylor Prep, which aims to help families and schools create 2- and 4-year college graduates with minimal debt. No, sounds like he got experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jack.
Yeah.
Here's Heloise. Dear Heloise, I came across a can. Oh, this one is for me and my wife. I came across a can of vegetable soup in my pantry, and the date on the bottom read March 25th, 2015. I called the company using the free customer service number on the can. The agent told me I had nothing to worry about. The soup is perfectly safe to eat. She said the date is to ensure the highest quality of product in terms of flavor, texture, and appearance. The vegetables can break down over time, but they are still okay. The company recommends eating the product before the better if used by date, but the product is safe after the date. If the date is 5 years ago, throw it out. Signed, and let's see now, now the next is Mark J. Fairfax of Virginia. I guess I haven't read Heloise for a long time. Can't figure out the format. Good for you. Checking the date. Thanks for the reminder that on most canned goods, the expiration or best buy date is a guideline. However, if the contents smell off, look off, or taste off, toss it immediately. No food poisoning allowed. Oh, and take advantage of those toll-free numbers. They are for you to use. When in doubt, call. Signed, Heloise. The next, Dear Heloise, I took an old ceramic teapot that had lost its lid, strung a thin wire through the handle, and hung it off a branch in the tree of my front yard. It is now the cutest birdhouse. It'll be fun to watch a bird family each morning. Mom giving flying lessons is the best. Signed, Heidi in Texas. Dear Heloise, I've been reading your column for years, and I don't think I've seen this hint. When I go into a department store on my way out, I find a perfume that I like, and I douse one of the little papers that are supplied alongside the sample bottle. Then I leave it in my car as an air freshener. The scent will last for several days. Signed, Pam F. via email. Dear Heloise, I hope you can help me. Recently, I decided to bake some bread from scratch, and I used the dining room table to cool the bread. I used a cooling rack on top of a bath towel. After removing the loaves from the metal pans, I found white areas on the dark stained table where the 2 loaves had been. The white areas really stand out. Is there anything I can do to restore the dark finish to my table? Signed, LL from Branson, Missouri. Help is here. Mix a small amount of white toothpaste, not gel, and baking soda, and rub into the white areas in the direction of the grain, and rub until warm. This can take quite a while. So be patient and don't give up. Once the white marks are gone, wipe with a damp cloth and polish the areas, then the table. Signed, Heloise. And the last, Dear Heloise, I always wear a wide headband under my shower cap. It keeps the hair around my face dry. Sound, Paula A. via email. Here's Jack.
Thank you. That's a new. Oh, that's Heloise. I thought maybe we ought to have an article. Bill and Jack. Tell it like it is.
Tell them.
We criticize everybody.
How not to do it.
Yeah, right. They poke fun of a lot. Oh, wait, don't worry, people. We won't do that. Here's it's called Edible Landscaping Through Alpine Berries. Let's see what they say. I'd heard about alpine strawberries for years before I finally tried them. Now I'm wondering why I waited so long. These dainty, pointed berries have a sweet, concentrated flavor that is something like a cross between pineapple and strawberry with a pinch and a touch of honey. Well, if you like the idea of edible landscaping but don't have the time to keep up with a big patch of June-bearing strawberries, you'll love growing alpines. They don't send out invasive runners. They produce very modest amounts of fruit continuously until fall frost. If you don't harvest for a while, you won't find a soggy mess of rotting fruit waiting for you. Alpine strawberries plants make a beautiful edging along a garden border and will also grow well in a pot. Also called woodland strawberries, they thrive with protection from the hot summer sun. They prefer their soil fertile, moist, and well-drained. The first year I grew these little gems, I started a seed of various variety called Mignoyet indoors in February and had bearing plants that same summer. You can also buy bare root bundles or potted plants ready for the garden, choosing from varieties with red, white, or yellow fruits. The only problem I've had growing alpine strawberries is that the birds love the berries as much as I do. Netting or a bird scare device may be necessary. When I describe alpine strawberries. Some people think it must be the wild strawberries that sometimes invades lawns. It's not. That weed is more accurately called mock strawberry or false strawberry. This creeper grows in sun or shade and is perfectly happy to crawl into flower borders. Although mock strawberries' red fruits look appealing, they taste awful. If yellow flowers precede the red berries, you can be sure it's mock strawberry. Although revered by some as a herbal medicine for treating a variety of ailments, to most gardeners, mock strawberry is just an unwanted weed. Now, another strawberry look-alike is a barren strawberry. It's a useful ground cover that performs well in full sun or moderate shade. It's right at home in the dry soil of a woody slope and makes a fine living mulch surrounding shrubs and small trees. A low mat forming perennial, it spreads by rhizomes, but slowly enough not to make a nuisance of itself. Barren strawberry has bright yellow flowers atop its glossy strawberry-like leaves. In autumn, leaves turn a pretty bronzy purple. Oh. So like colorful. I don't know. Is it good to eat? I didn't. You don't eat it. It says berries, but well, he said these dainty berries have a sweet, concentrated flavor.
I guess that sounds
A
like you
cross
could eat.
between pineapple and strawberry with a touch of honey.
Huh.
I've never
We'll have to look for those
looked for that.
in your grocery store, huh?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Today in history, Charlotte Brandt says, I try to avoid looking forward or backward and try to keep looking upward. She lived from 1816 to 1855. Today is also April 21st, 1926. Britain's Queen Elizabeth II was born in Mayfair, London. She was the first child of the Duke and Duchess of York, who later became King George VI and the Queen Mother.
90 years old today.
My
He's
gosh.
pretty, yeah.
She looks wonderful.
Oh, doesn't she though? I mean, for somebody who's 90, and considering all the things she must do over a period of time, she really does look great.
Let's see. She became a monarch upon the death of her father in 1952. I remember that. Beginning a 64-year reign, surpassing that of Queen Victoria. And in 1649, the Maryland Toleration Act, providing for freedom of worship for all Christians, was passed by the Maryland Assembly. 1789, John Adams was sworn in as the first vice president of the United States. 1816 was Charlotte Brandt, author of Jane Eyre, and she was born in Thornton, England. In 1836, an army of Texans led by Sam Houston defeated the Mexicans at San Jacinto, assuring Texas independence. And in 1910, author Samuel Langhorne Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, died in Redding, Connecticut at the age of 74. Let's see. 1960, Brazil was inaugurated, its new capital, Brasilia, transferring the seat of national government from Rio de Janeiro. Here's Jack.
I'm looking at the comics right now. I'm trying to see if there's something kind of funny or not. Peanuts. It's got four panels, and here's the first panel is Charlie and I don't know who the little girl's name is. Is that no? But anyways, it's Charlie and little girlfriend, and she says, "Hi, Chuck. I wanted to talk to you about that about the game we forfeited to you a couple of days ago." We're talking about some baseball. Okay. Second panel says this. A lot of our guys were sick. Remember? Well, I could have come over and beat your team all by myself, but I don't want to make a fool out of you. And she keeps on talking in panel 3. I'm that way, Chuck, sort of compassionate, you know? And then there's Charlie all by himself. It's hard not to appreciate such compassion. Kind of funny, I guess. Let me see what Pickle says. Do I know them? I think his name is Earl. I forget her name. So the first panel has Earl and his wife there. And he says, the thing that separates a man from beast is man's ability to envision a better world and then work to make it a reality. It's not easy, the whole thing, though. And then she looks at him and says, true. And then Earl says, often there are great obstacles to overcome. And then her name is Opal, I see. Opal still won't let you install a urinal in the bedroom? And he says, nope. I get that one too funny, I guess. Oh, well, let's see what we got here. We got the Wizard of Ib. Dragon resin, Norwood powder, rock, root of poison, rat's needle. These are all materials that the wizard is putting in. Centipede, bile, demon, vomit, mind of donkey, yellow number 5. And then the monster says, you monster. I'm not doing very good. I thought I could find something.
Those are tough.
Even where I can see them, see the characters, that's still not funny. But okay.
In business?
It's all yours.
Okay.
1141.
Okay, we're talking about the new face of the $20 bill.
Yeah.
And it shows a picture of Harriet Tubman, and she is shown here between 1860 and 1875. She will become the first African American on U.S. paper money and the first woman to be depicted on currency in 100 years. Alexander Hamilton will remain on the front of the $10 bill, ending a backlash over a plan to remove him from Washington. Harriet Tubman, an African-American abolitionist who was born a slave, will stand with George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Benjamin Franklin among the iconic faces of U.S. currency. The $20 bill will be redesigned with Tubman's portrait on the front, marking 2 historic milestones, Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew announced Wednesday. Tubman will become the first African American on U.S. paper money and the first woman to be depicted on currency in 100 years. The leader of the Underground Railroad will replace the portrait of Andrew Jackson, the nation's 7th president and a slave owner, who will be pushed to the back of the bill. Lew also settled a backlash that had erupted after he announced an initial plan to remove Alexander Hamilton, the nation's first Treasury Secretary, from the $10 bill in order to honor a woman on the bill. Hamilton will remain on the $10 note, Lew said. Instead, the Treasury building on the back of the bill will be changed to depict a 1913 march for the rights of women to vote and include portraits of suffrage leaders Lucretia Mott, Sojourner Truth, Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Alice Paul. The back of the $20, which now shows the White House, will be redesigned to include the White House and Jackson, whose statue stands across the street in Lafayette Park. Here's Jack.
Very good. Some business briefs here. The CEO of Canadian Pacific still thinks railroad mergers are needed if the industry is to handle more freight, even after the company's bid for Norfolk Southern Railroad crumpled under stiff resistance. Hunter Harrison said Wednesday that he thinks major railroad mergers will happen eventually and that they'll be successful. He said worsening congestion in Chicago, where the major railroads all meet, will force a change. Harrison believes some of the opposition to Canadian Pacific Railroad attempted buyout came from people worried about the service problems that followed past railroad deals. And some news about Coca-Cola. They said yesterday that first quarter sales volume for beverages like Diet Coke and Cherry Coke that bear its name collectively declined in North America, Europe, and the unit, including the Middle East and Africa. Total sales volume rose 2%, helped by other sodas like Fanta and Strength in non-carbonated drinks like bottled water and sports drinks. And this business brief, sales of existing homes rose 5.1% last month to a seasonally adjusted annual rate of just over 5.3 million, according to the National Association of Realtors. The increase follows a 7.3% decline in February sales. Gains were concentrated last month in the Northeast and here in the Midwest. Well, good. We could use some good business news. I think it's the quarter to 12.
Yay.
Hooray, and that brings us into sports.
In sports,
Let's see, we got
the horses at Fauner Park are quarantined due to an illness, Grand Island. Hundreds of racehorses have been quarantined at Fauner Park in Grand Island because 3 of them tested positive for equine herpes. One of the horses has been euthanized, but the remaining 2 are getting better with treatment, the Nebraska Agricultural Department said. Fauner CEO Bruce Swihart said officials became aware of the sickness Sunday evening and that he doesn't know how the horses contracted the virus. They've been at Fauner for a couple of months. The U.S. Department of Agriculture's National Veterinary Services Laboratory in Ames, Iowa, evaluated nasal swabs and blood samples from the 3 horses to confirm the disease. Swihart said 750 to 850 horses at Fauner Park can't leave until the minimum 21-day quarantine is lifted. Fauner will continue racing through May 7th, but the 150 or so horses in the same barn as the 3 that tested positive won't be allowed to race. Excuse me, the virus cannot be spread to humans or other animals, but it can be transferred to other horses through boots, buckets, clothes, feed, tack, or alternative means. Symptoms of the disease include fever, decreased coordination, hind limb weakness, lethargy, and the inability to rise. Excuse me. And in baseball, Mavericks game against Kansas State rained out. The UNO baseball team's game against Kansas State Wednesday at Warner Park was canceled due to rain. A makeup date hasn't been determined. The Mavericks began a 3-game series with South Dakota State at 3 p.m. Friday at the ballpark at Boys Town. And in softball, Creighton's game at South Dakota is postponed. The Creighton softball team's Wednesday game at South Dakota was postponed by rain. No makeup date has been announced. The Jays stay on the road for a weekend series at Butler, starting with a doubleheader at 11 a.m. on Saturday. Here's Jack.
Thank you, Will. A little article about the Olympic swim trials. As you know, Omaha, they've done it for a number of years, been the home pool for the Olympics, and they start June 26th through July 3rd down a CenturyLink. The pool for the U.S. Olympic trials will reflect some minor technological changes since the nation's best swimmers last visited the CenturyLink Center. 2 specific innovations also will alleviate some of the time and the difficulty involved in constructing the 50-meter pool, which recently began its shipping journey from Italy. We're hoping for a less stressful build than in the past, said Harold Cliff, who's CEO of the U.S. Olympic Trials and president of the Omaha Sports Commission. Both the competition and the warm-up pools, again, will be supplied and assembled by Murtha Pools. The most significant changes are these. Murtha will no longer use the precast concrete blocks to form the base under the pool, as it did in 2008 and 2012. Instead, it will ship a prefabricated steel foundation with all holes pre-drilled at the factory, allowing the base and the walls to be more easily pieced together here in Omaha. The pools are now built with what's called a movable head wall that can be adjusted even after being filled with roughly 1 million gallons of water. John Ireland of Murtha Pools said it will be the first time that innovation is used in the United States. It's also going to do this. The competition pool will be about 1 meter wider than the 2 others built in the CenturyLink Center, allowing for ropes on the outside of lane 0 and lane 9. Those lanes, only used in some preliminary morning swims, previously were boarded by the walls. It's a very small point, but why not do it right, Cliff said. It makes the water a little calmer, but more importantly, it makes it so that if you're in those lanes, you know where the ropes are. The two pools were manufactured and stored in about a half dozen containers before leaving Italy. After arriving in Genoa, Italy, they were shipped to New York. Their arrival in Omaha should be about May 21st or 23rd. U.S. trials are June 26th through the July 3rd. The CenturyLink Center also will host the Omaha Cup test event June 17th and 18th. The builds before 2008 and 2012 trials took about 15 to 17 days, including the completion of deck, matting, and lighting. Ireland, the director of the technical services for Mercer Pool, said the concrete was previously used to avoid putting 2,000 holes in the floor of the CenturyLink Center. The blocks still sit in storage near Epley Airfield. Ireland said the steel base will look like a checkerboard after being laid. The walls then affixed to existing holes rather than needing holes to be drilled into the concrete. The floor gaps within the steel grid are filled with particle board, and the weight of the pool holds everything in place. I don't say I understand it, but it's like they do a lot of things to make it. They redo it. Omaha redoes that upright, don't
Oh,
they? The
yes,
pools.
it's wonderful.
I've never seen it. Have you?
Nor have I. Only on TV.
I've heard this.
Mhm.
Quite a thing to attend.
Thank you, Jack. In Nebraska football, the team's APR falls, and I'll tell you what APR is in just a moment. They are ranked 6th in the Big Ten. Nebraska's football saw its multi-year academic progress rate fall slightly during the 2014-15 academic year. New data released Wednesday by the NCAA shows the Huskers with an APR, academic progress rate, of 981. That ranks them 6th in the Big Ten and is down from a score of 985 in 2013-14. They still land within the 80th to 90th percentile of all football teams. APR is a multi-year measurement of academic progress and an institution's retention of student athletes. It factors whether a student athlete is academically eligible following an academic term, and also whether a student athlete returns to his or her institution for the following term. A perfect APR is 1,000. Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Northwestern tied to lead the Big Ten with a score of 992. Nebraska also trails Michigan, 989, and Illinois, 982. Iowa tied for 11th with Ohio State with a score of 971. Though down from the previous year, Nebraska's APR in 2014-15 is its second highest of the last decade. The Husker APR was 932 in 2004-05, and rose each year until a high point of 985 in 2013-14. Here's Jack.
Okay, I was looking for something that might be interesting, unusual, but let's say there's page 2. There must be a page 1. Okay.
You got her. That's page 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to find page. I found page 2. I'm going to look at page 1 where it began, because it's something about. What is it? Well, this is college football. Okay, it's about a Millard West graduate. He's making strides for the Cardinal as he comes back from knee surgery. Harrison Phillips got a taste this spring, strapping on the pads and putting on his helmet so he could maneuver through drills with the rest of the Stanford defensive line teammates. But the former Millard West standout, just 6 months removed from knee surgery, wasn't permitted to do much more than that in practice. Once the hitting began, Phillips was only allowed to watch, and that was slightly tortuous for the potentially filled sophomore whose weight room work had resulted in a 50-pound gain in 2 years, and who's now eager to compete again for a starting job with the reigning Pac-12 champs. Phillips wants to play. It was tough to get to go through the first part of practice, and that's when the fun began. When the fun part stars start to sit out, Phillips said. But I'm really, really excited, mainly just excited to go get back with my teammates, to be with those guys who've been so supportive. And just to listeners here, this Phillips is a different Phillips than the guy who was, Becky died, I think, about a month ago. He was in a lot of trouble, and this is a different Phillips. This is a younger guy from high school. Moving on with the article, the past few months certainly haven't been easy for Phillips, though. He made his Stanford debut midway through his freshman season because of depth concerns, packing up 2 sacks and 9 tackles in 6 games. Then he emerged as a starter during the 2015 preseason, but he tore his ACL in the season opening loss at Northwestern. Gone was his ability to make an on-field contribution to the Cardinal and the exhilarating feel that accompanies a playmaking moment, particularly after a week's worth of behind-the-scenes prep with a committed group of teammates. Phillips had to watch games from his dorm room. He worked out with a redshirt freshman within Stanford's developmental program. There's a grieving process, he said. I tried to speed mine up as much as I could. Obviously, it was real dark for a while there, but once you kind of got that, made the turn, that darkness turned into motivation. You start wanting to get back to where you were. The rehab is almost done now. He's running, boxing, box jumping, and squatting. Phelps will still admits he's a tad uncertain about the knee stability. Feelings of doubt, he knows, are commonly associated after a ligament in surgical repair. I think it's going to be for a while until I really know what it's going to play like to get to the point where I'm not thinking about my knee, Phillips said. That will come soon, he's certain. When it does, Phillips has a chance to break out. He was the 2014 Nebraska High School Boys Athlete of the Year and a 3-time state wrestling champion. He had 9 sacks, 21 tackles for a loss as a senior defensive lineman at Miller West. His skills, work ethic, and promise have all caught the attention of teammates. Heisman Trophy finalist Christian McCaffrey has been impressed. He's unbelievable, McCaffrey said. I cannot wait to watch him play and to see the things that are coming ahead for him. As a guy who works extremely hard day in, day out, add that on top of what he's been doing, and he's going to be really good this year. McCarthy was in Omaha last week to receive the Jet Award given to the nation's top return man. Phelps made sure to return home in support. That's the article.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. In basketball, the Timberwolves hire Thibodeau as coach and president from Minneapolis. The Minnesota Timberwolves have hired former Chicago Bulls coach Tom Thibodeau as coach and president of basketball operations, the team announced Wednesday night. Thibodeau was the most coveted coach on the market, and he's bringing his intensity and hard-driving approach to a franchise that has not made the playoffs since 2004. He won nearly 65% of his games in 5 seasons with the Bulls, but was fired after last season amid speculation of a rift with general manager Gar Forman. Landing a big-name coach was a major development for a Wolves franchise that has the longest-running playoff drought in the NBA and has routinely had to settle for second, third, or fourth choices when jobs opened up. But the team owner, Glenn Taylor, armed with one of the most promising young rosters in the league, turned 75 on Wednesday and doesn't want to wait around any longer for the team to become a winner. In other NBA news, Stephen Curry's sprained right ankle is feeling better, but he isn't sure if he will be able to play on Thursday night in Game 3 of the Golden State's first-round playoff series against the Houston Rockets. And Celtics coach, some people call him, Brad Stevens, said Wednesday that starting guard Avery Bradley is out for the next 2 playoff games against the Hawks with a right hamstring injury and is very unlikely to return for the rest of the first-round series. And the Hawks, meanwhile, are hopeful that backup point guard Dennis Schroeder will be able to play in Game 3 against Boston after injuring his left ankle. We're just about out of time.
Well, yeah, I watched this digital clock go from 11:59 to 12 here, and there it is.
There it is. Yes, the time is 12 o'clock.
12
Right
o'clock
up.
noon on the day is half over with, and we've been pleased to be able to bring you the news that was worth reading to you. You all have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you again next time.
Have a nice afternoon.
And thank you both very, very much. Thank you, Bill Everhart. Thank you, Jack Gibbs, for coming in and giving up your time today. So
Well,
we kept informed by your reading. Have a wonderful week. Stay dry and warm. It looks like Saturday and Sunday is going to be close to 80 degrees. So please enjoy.
Yeah, the weather is up and down. That weather is up and down. You don't know
Oh, yeah.
what to wear